On today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast, we are joined by James Edwards III, the athletic Detroit Pistons beat writer, to talk about the Detroit Pistons season, their future potential moves that can be made. Stay tuned for all of that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Let me move my mic away a little bit. I feel like I'm a little too close to it. I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen every single day. James, thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, a very busy man, especially during this time. So I thank you taking time out of your day to come chop it up with me. I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. You guys usually enjoy the ones me and James record. It's a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and get right into it. James, obviously, you've written quite a few articles over the past, I'd say, like 2 weeks or so, about the Pistons, potential changes or potential like future, what's going on, what's being talked about, and what could they do moving forward. Just give us a brief. We'll dive into it, but just give us a brief description of what you're hearing about Piston changes. Are there going to be changes coming soon? Or what are you hearing?
Yeah, so I think I can't say with certainty, right? Like, I know that there are guys. I know they want a forward or two. Like, I know that's something they look at. Do I know that they want to get that done before the trade deadline? Do I know that they're eyeing a bigger fish in the summer? Could be either one, right? Maybe one of the bigger fish they're eyeing in the summer becomes available sooner rather than later. I think a lot of my reporting about change needing to come is just it is what it like the roster is what it is right now. The record is what it is. Like, it just feels like this team needs something. Like, I don't even know if it needs to be like a massive thing right now. I think most people, like, I understand fans like are holding on hope to like the season can get turned around, but like the season's done. Like, at this point, it's like nothing that they could really realistically do. Like, they could add Luca, and I'm not sure that they're gonna make up a 20 game difference, right? Like, it's kind of they are where they are. But I think the one thing that hasn't been talked about, and I think most fans probably don't want to hear this, but you have to understand, I guess, also what the front office's job is. I don't think they're rushing to make a move because ultimately we all knew there would be a day that comes when they push their chips into the table and go get somebody. Like, if the writing was on the wall, you can't have all these young players. So what the job of the front office is being able, when something presents itself, being able to strike, right? Like, whether or not the Pistons should have traded for Blake Griffin is one thing, but they had the stuff to go get it done. We could do a bunch of, like, what was it, like Cleveland being able to go get Donovan Mitchell, or Atlanta being able to go get DeJounte Murray. So I think one thing that really hasn't been talked about, I know people don't want to hear it because they just want this team to be better, but I also think that there's a chance that they're just making sure that they have all the available tools at their disposal. If something happens, they're able to be in the running for it, right? Like, if you name a player on this roster that you think like has good trade value that's not Cade. I don't want to pick. I'll let you pick a name.
I mean, I'm glad you asked that, because I was actually just about to ask you, do you think they even have the tools to do that? Because I don't think they do.
I don't know if they do right now. I also don't know exactly how other people view their players. I think, like, for example, people could see the Ivy thing, like, he hasn't been great, but other teams could see it's like the situation, Monty not playing him, lost to confidence, whatever. Like, maybe they think they can salvage him. I don't know if that necessarily tanks his value or whatever. But let's use him as an example. a quick fix would be trading Ivy for Levine, right? But if you want OG Anunoby, two Ivy plus something else will have to get you in the running there. So if you trade Ivy for Levine, then you kind of put yourself out of the running for something else that probably makes more sense. So I think that's kind of where I'm curious to see where they land. Do they just try to build up their assets that they have and make a push whenever the time is right, or do they try to, if this thing keeps spiraling the way it is, do they try to do like a something in the short term to try to fix it? I don't know if they obviously didn't want to lose this much and they didn't expect this to happen, but I also don't think they're going to deviate from the plan because this happened.
Well, see, this is where how I feel about it. One, I completely agree that it seems like that they were trying to size up the ability to be able to go and make like a trade like that. I just don't think they even have the assets to do that. I think they failed in that department. I
That's
think their
fair.
I think their asset management has been pretty bad. I think going all the way back to like the Bruce Brown trade in 2020, I think they've taken some minor losses in each trade that when you look at the individual trade, you'll say, "Oh, it's not that big of a deal. You got who you wanted." But as it stacks up over time, I think it kind of hurts you in the end. For example, like the fact they have a first round pick tied up in that Isaiah Stewart trade. Now I know they could kind of like they could try to trade the front half of that if they want to get like wonky up with it,
Yeah,
or they
there's
could
ways
just
to shimmy. Yeah.
yeah, they could go like super aggressive and try to get it back from New York. I think they can trade the 2028 one now, but it just requires a lot of, kind of a lot of hoops to jump through with that now.
Can
Uh,
I ask you a question really quick about the Bruce Brown one? Because I haven't really gotten a chance to like talk to somebody about it.
all right, go ahead.
I think we're both on the same page that what they gave up for Bruce Brown, I wouldn't have done it. Like I'd rather just roll the dice and find out what Bruce Brown would have became, correct? Like we're both on that same
Right.
page. But my argument is like I don't think they like in the moment, I don't think 2 second-round picks for Bruce Brown was low value. Like I feel like that was fair value for Bruce Brown.
Well, I think if you also take into account that they basically like they ended up having to pay more to get rid of Musa by waiving him before the season.
No. I agree with that. But I'm saying the value of Bruce at that time was probably 2 seconds.
That's fair.
That's my only like when I see people talk about like they gave Bruce away. Like, yeah, they gave Bruce away because I would have rather have just rolled the dice on Bruce instead of trading 2 seconds for him. So I think we're all in agreement there. But I also don't think that like they weren't getting a first for Bruce at that time. You have to remember where the Pistons were and Bruce, like Bruce was what a second or third guard on a bad team.
Well, can I give another example to you?
Please,
Another,
yeah, no, I'm just
no,
want to
no,
make
no.
sure I'm not
I hear you.
defending them. I'm just saying I know that argument is always like I think people see Bruce Brown now and think that the Pistons that was the Bruce Brown the Pistons gave away.
So I agree. I was really high on Bruce. I think you know that, but
Yeah,
I can see what you're saying.
that was my guy. I love Bruce.
Come on.
No,
So
I do. I love Bruce too. I saw him the other day. It was great to see him.
lucky. So I want to say this real quick. Bruce, my first year credential was the nicest one to me. Him and Langston were nice as hell to me in the locker room. They always talked with me. They always answered all my questions. Super cool.
Great
Um,
guys.
But another example I want to give, like the asset management, is a situation that I was pretty loud about this offseason. And it
Mhm.
wasn't even just him, but like kind of like Alec Burks right now. Alec Burks, his value was pretty high, not high, but high to his standard, I'd say, at his point in his career last season. Could have moved him for maybe like 2 seconds or something. Who knows? At this point, now he's 34, shooting 34% from the field. He's a year older. And I think the problem or the risk that you take in those situations when you are a young team that's basically just, they were the worst team in the league last year. When you have vets, you usually see guys, especially when your franchise players out and they're kind of like on short-term deals, you kind of move them for value what you can, get some assets moving forward, especially when the Pistons had cap space. They could have replaced whoever they wanted in the offseason, got
Mhm.
some vets from that point, and then move the ones they currently had for assets. They wait a year. Now, I don't think you could get anything for Burks. He's shooting 34%. So you kind of lost the value there. I just think they haven't done a great job of acquiring assets and building up and managing their assets. And I also think, to go back to your original point, I don't think that I think if they were to make a move, I think they have to make a move. But I don't think it's to save the season, as in like make the play in or make the playoffs or anything like that. Like I agree, it's completely done.
Yeah.
I think that you have to make a move to try to take something from this season. I think with what's going on right now, you're not even getting development from players. You're not even getting like a good product put on the floor. You're getting guys developing bad habits. Guys are breaking down I think, within games quickly. I think Asar kind of spoke to it the other day where it's like he doesn't think they're walking into the games broken, but he thinks they're getting quickly broken within a game. Basically, like if they get hit with the run, it's like just like that, they're done. Like it's like they're getting mentally broken down. I think if you continue to trot this out over and over, that's what you're going to get. And you're not going to get anything positive out of your season. You're just going to continue to develop bad habits for young guys. They're not going to learn how to win. They're not going to be able to develop what they want on the floor. I think if you make a move for some guys, or maybe a guy or two, that better fits the roster, yeah, you're not going to make the play-in, but I think there's incredible value still in being able to put an environment and a team around your young guys that allows them to develop good habits and obviously their skill set.
Like go on like a second half of the season run like the Lions did, I guess what you're saying, like build the
Yeah, kind of like,
momentum.
you know how like the Magic did last year? I think the
Yeah,
Magic
like
started
the
off like
Magic
5 and
did.
23.
Yep. But yeah, no, I'm with you. Like I think we're on the same page there.
And it doesn't
And
have to be for a star too. I know you mentioned like would they
yeah,
have to take a big swing?
just
They don't.
change the juju.
Right.
Yeah, I feel you. I think we're in agreement there. Yeah, that's when I've written the stuff I've written about, like the columns kind of saying something needs to change. It's pretty much that. Like it just seems like a broken group, and maybe you just fresh body, if it's a little bit more juice injected, just somebody new, like maybe it changes things and helps with like what you said. Like at the end of the day, whether they were trying to win or not this year, the most important thing is the internal development, and you can still salvage that. Like that's still salvageable. And just to go back to something that you said about Burks, just to play devil's advocate, because I mean it's a podcast. What else are we gonna do? I I agree. There's probably they could have flipped Burks, but if the goal was to be better, and you have a guy like Burks, like forget what the Burks we know now, right? Prior to how long he was good for what the first month when he played. All right, so for the last month and a half, he's been atrocious. Like for 10 million a year, if you're trying to get better, like I don't mind keeping Alec Burks. You know what I mean? Like I don't think if anybody predicted this, like it's not even like this was just like Burks came into the season and it was broke. Like this happened like a month and a half ago. So like I understand what you're saying. Like, yeah, you want to capitalize. And now if there was a first round pick out there for Alec Burks, sure, like you do that. If there was like a second, I'm like, I don't know. I kind of want my team to be a little bit better. Alec Burks is a good player. He's been a great shoot. Like what is happening to Alec Burks is more baffling to me than the losing streak, to be honest with you.
Fair enough.
It is crazy.
So I want to answer that. I want to answer that. We'll come back to it because I had to get to this ad break, but we'll come back and I'll answer that. And then we'll move on after that to, I want to play a game of like most likely with James, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we come back. But first, I've got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, eBay Motors. So with eBay Motors, our partners over there have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And like I told you guys last time, the last few weeks, Josh has been picking some Detroit Pistons on his list. A few weeks ago, he had Jane Ivey. He had Asar Thompson, and this week he has James Wiseman on the list. I understand where he's coming from here. Jalen Duren, he's out. Isaiah Stewart is currently out. He might be coming back soon. But either way, James Wiseman has gotten more tick as of late. He played more minutes than Marvin Bagley in this last game. And despite James Wiseman not being very good, I think he's actually been somewhat better lately and gives some kind of hope that maybe he's starting to pick up some things. Despite that, he's going to continue to get some minutes for the team, and that should provide some kind of value in your fantasy league. Josh writes here, Isaiah Stewart's hurt. Wiseman has produced over the last 2 games. Confidence is low, but the numbers and opportunity appear to be there. And again, I completely agree with that. I think Wiseman's probably going to continue to get 24, 25 minutes a game, especially if Bagley were to struggle and if Duren doesn't come back and Stu doesn't come back. I think Wiseman has an opportunity here to put up some numbers. Whether he's actually impacting the Pistons, doesn't matter. It's fantasy basketball. He might help you guys out there. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Boners knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit, and it's the same thing with your vehicle. And like I've told you guys many times over the last few years, when I was a delivery driver, my car constantly broke down on me. And I had to constantly find the right parts, expensive parts. It'd take me forever. It was one of the biggest hassles in my life. until I got with eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly all throughout the year. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride or die the first time, every time, or you'll get your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply with eBay Motors. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Just real quickly, I just wanted to give my counter to what you brought up with Burks, and then we'll move on to this game I wanted to play real quickly. I would agree with that sentiment if it was during a season or entering into an off season where the Pistons didn't have $60 million or however much they had in cap space. I feel like they could have flipped Burks. I also even feel this way about Bojan. They could have flipped Burks and Bojan last year, got assets back for them. Obviously, they would have got a top pick this year. And then they would have had not only assets returning for them, then they could have used that money to then replace them. So now you got vets and plus the assets that you got from those guys. I feel like they could have got vets in the free agency. If they couldn't have replaced those guys with money that was already there, I would agree with that. But since they already had money available to them to get those vets, they could have added, in my opinion, assets last year and then also vets. And now you have some that you don't have right now, which right now they just have vets, one who's not playing very well, and they don't have assets, if you get what I'm saying.
I got what you're saying. My question to your question is, who are the players you're replacing them with? Yeah,
okay.
Names.
You're gonna get us into
no, you can't say that and not give who at that time was gonna give you Alec Burks production for $10 million a year.
Oh, it didn't have to be for $10 million a year, but they weren't cap strong. If they were cap strong, I'd agree, but they weren't cap. They couldn't have went out and got Well,
yeah, but they only had $30 million. So
yeah, but they could have got So for example, Kelly Oubre signed for $2 million in Philly. How much more do you think it would have taken to get him to come to Detroit instead?
Probably like a normal deal, I would guess.
What would you say, like 10 to 12 million?
I'd say Burks money, yeah.
Right. So I would have got Kelly Oubre 10 to 12 million.
Fair.
I think he's been exceptional for the Sixers.
But are you saying that because of what you just said, that he's been exceptional? Would you have taken Kelly Oubre over Burks this summer?
My listeners can back up that all summer Kelly Oubre was number 2 on my list of guys that I wanted. It was Cam Johnson and then Kelly Oubre.
Oh, you were on the Cam Johnson train?
I was on the Cam Johnson train.
How do you feel about that now? Glad they didn't do it.
The thing is, at the time, I said that if he was, as it got closer to $30 million a year, I slowly felt uncomfortable. I get more and more uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
I would have done it. I think the number I said I would have done it at was 27. I think 27 was where I would have, as high as I would have went. And I not that I would absolutely not do it above it, but I would have started to feel even more uncomfortable at each million that you go above that. That was my stance with Cam.
Yeah, that's fair. I think for me, I was always like, this guy's hurt all the time. And just because you have money doesn't mean you have to spend it. Summer of 2016, John Lure, Langston Galloway, Bojan Marjanovic. Wait, what am I saying? How do you say Bobby's first name? Yeah, Boban. Why am I? Sorry. I've been on the road for 6 days. Sorry, I'm fried. Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think that kind of went out the window when the head coach who coached him and knew about those knees was like, yeah, let's not do this. But I got the appeal. I'm not questioning the appeal of Cam Johnson. I want to make that clear. Cam Johnson would be perfect on this team. I just would be very afraid if I'm an organization that finally has flexibility and then I spend it on a guy whose knees might fail him. That's the thing. And the other thing with Luke, right? I think people think Pistons just got rid of Luke. Luke misses 20 games a year because of his knees. Has he been back yet for Memphis?
No, I think he's currently still out right now.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And we're not talking about the value that he got back in the trade, the trade. I think that's the thing. It's I like that it's backfired because now guys that haven't really been hurt are now hurt for them. But you know what I mean? Guys who have injury histories, they kind of stayed away from, which, again, step in the right direction, but it's backfired, as you can see, because guys who don't usually get hurt have now been hurt for quite some time.
I mean, I feel it. I think there was even like some smaller free agents they could have got after. I don't want to turn this into me just
No, we
saying
can go to something else. It was just conversation.
no, I got you. But Yuta Watanabe, another one I think they could have like it would have been not an expensive guy. And he would have been valuable for what this team needed.
For sure. All right. So my other question to you,
Go
because
ahead.
I think we're in agreement that the lineups. I kind of want to shift the like when I see it on Twitter, and I know I'm gonna get called whatever for this, but it's just a conversation. I just like to hear your point. I think the spacing issues are more on Monty than Troy.
I think it's both.
Fair, but let me say this right. You see the tweets that Troy like has not gotten any 3-point shooters, right? Well, first, one thing I want to talk about is the roster that he got his first year. I always wonder if that like scarred him, right? Like he went and got Kelly Olynyk, perfect, right? Like that's the four. Like Kelly Olynyk was atrocious here. Like I'm sure that's you know what I mean. Like he was
Yeah,
bad
he
here.
wasn't very good.
He was bad here. Lyles, you probably should have kept, right? Like that one I get. That was a good signing that they flipped. Try to see if they could salvage a former number 2 pick, whatever. Like team building purposes, yeah, I get why people are upset, but like I also understand if you're trying to build up assets, like taking a gamble there. If it costs you only Trey Lyles and who else, Josh Jackson,
I
to get
think
a,
the bigger issue with that trade was that he then doubled down and gave him a 3-year contract.
that's fair. No, I agree. I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that. All right, so back to my original point. I think the narrative I see is that Troy didn't go out and get any shooters. My argument to that is Morris, near 40% 3-point shooter, hasn't played a game. Burks, about a 40% 3-point shooter for his career, fell off a cliff. Bogey, 40% three. Joe Harris, one of the greatest shooters ever, can't buy a bucket to save his life, even if he's just standing still. Livers was a 40% 3-point shooter in college. Not sure what's going on there. Cade, a 40% 3-point shooter in college, still figuring it out in the league. Jaden Ivey shot 37% from 3 this year. He's made like 3 threes in the last. Like, I just named 7 guys who are supposed to be good to great 3-point shooters. Has it happened? Like, I understand, like, at the end of the day, it's somebody's fault. But I don't think the spacing issues are because the players weren't there. They're either not available or they decided to go about starting in a certain way.
So
What
do
are
you remember
your
when you
thoughts on that?
came? Do you remember when you came on the podcast in the summer and we talked about this? I know you guys were enjoying this segment, but I gotta cut it off for just a brief second to tell you guys about one of my favorite sponsors, Gametime. For someone like me who is a procrastinator who waits to the last second with everything, especially when it comes to purchasing tickets, it always ends up biting me in the back because I always end up getting the worst seats. I end up getting terrible prices. I end up getting terrible deals. But with Gametime, you get last minute deals all the way up again, obviously, to the last minute, and sometimes even after the event starts. With Gametime, you can purchase tickets to sporting events, music events, comedy events, theater events, any kind of event you can purchase tickets to with Gametime. And not only do they have those last minute ticket deals with Gametime, another great thing with Gametime is you get to see what your seat looks like on the app. A lot of times you purchase tickets, you show up, you're like, oh God, these tickets, the seat was not very good. I shouldn't have gotten these ones. You don't have to worry about that with Gametime. You see exactly where your seat is going to be at before you have to purchase them. Another great thing with Gametime, you don't have to go digging through your email to get your tickets. You simply click the app, 2 taps, you're set. It's right there for you. Gametime is the best way to purchase your tickets, to go about getting your tickets to any event. I love Gametime. I know you guys will too. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Gametime.
If you remind me what I said or you said, yes.
So we talked about this very point. It was right. I think it was like the month before the season started.
Mhm.
And what we talked about was, did they actually add spacing? And what I said to you was, I think if you looked at it individually, like Joe Harris, sure. I said that I didn't think they actually added spacing and where they could actually use functional lineups and actually use that spacing they had. Like they can't play. Like you're not gonna be able to get away with running Cade, Monte, Bojan, Joe Harris, because the defense is just gonna be horrible. Like you're not gonna be able to get away with it.
Right, but
And
you could get away with Cade, Ivy, Livers.
well, fair, but Livers also has been. You
Well,
talk about a guy who's been hurt.
that's what
A
I'm
guy,
saying, though, right? Like,
but that was a history though. That's when we've had 2 years of
not even
evidence
the
with him.
history. I'm just talking about his shot. Like, this isn't the same guy we all watch. You're a Michigan fan. Like, you watch Livers. Like, this isn't. Nobody thought it
Fair.
would be
I
this.
was high on Livers. He just hasn't been very good this year.
Yeah.
Also, I was my listeners will back me up with this one. I never liked the Joe Harris move from the get go because he was cooked last year with Brooklyn. He
That's
wasn't
fair.
good last year with Brooklyn.
That's
I
fair. But
thought
if you get 2 seconds with it, it's like.
well that was the whole. I
And it
get
goes
that
back
point.
to like what we were talking about with free agency. Are you going to just spend money just to spend money and lock guys in? Like, if you didn't like anybody in the class, why not just, all right, well, maybe Joe's healthy. We have a shooter. We also get picks. Like, and we're only locked in for a year as opposed to signing Max Strus, who everybody, I also think another thing that people, who's to say the Pistons didn't go after Max Strus, right? But Max Strus
I,
just decided to sign with Cleveland.
are you like telling us something here, or are you just like
No, I know that they had interest in Max Strus. Yeah. Mac, I don't know the number that I don't know if they offered more than Cleveland. I don't know that. But you know what I mean? Like, I think people forget that like players have have choices too. Like
well, I
they don't
think one of the see this is the thing though. I agree, but then also there's two things I respond with that.
yeah.
One, I think if you're a GM of Detroit, you gotta just accept that you're probably gonna have to pay more than market value just to get someone to come to Detroit. I think that's just something that's gonna happen. And
I,
two,
yeah. But would you do that for Max Strus?
we'll see. This will be the reason. This will be my second point.
Okay.
My second point would then be okay if you don't want to do that, that's fine. If your plan is to kick it down the road, which in the offseason I said I understood that plan, I get it. You're kicking it down the road. You keeping flexibility.
And you
You get
can't
two
kick the
second round
can down
picks.
the road anymore from here.
But
Yeah.
this is my biggest point. If you do that, you then can't have the worst season in NBA history follow that up. If you do that and then this
Fair.
season you're still developing and it doesn't blow up in your face, then okay. The fact that you do that and then you come out the next season, you're arguably having the worst season of all time in NBA history. That now you're like, if it works out, then no one says anything. If it works out, then okay, you got away with it.
Right.
But
Right.
if you don't get away with it, now it's all on you. Now you got because this is the road you chose to go down because you didn't want to use your money. You see what I'm saying?
No, I understand every point you're coming from. I just want to make that clear. It's just to have the conversation, and it kind of goes back to the first thing I talked about, right? Like the Pistons, I think, and it's something that hasn't necessarily been talked about because everybody wants them to do something now. Leaving the flexibility open to strike on the deal. Whatever I don't even know if they know that what the deal is yet, right? But it always comes across. So, like you said, if you don't think that they have the assets in house yet to do it, maybe the flexibility or the expiring contracts. Like, I just think that they knew they weren't in a place to. And I think I wrote about it or said it on the pod, maybe
You
both.
did.
But like,
No, you wrote about it. I remember reading it.
saying that you're trying to compete until the end, even when the roster doesn't suggest that, was I think a bad move because everybody's going to hold you to it, right? You shouldn't have just said it out. This shouldn't have just been said out loud. But also, people would have been upset if you said we're trying to just simply develop again, right? Like, so my thing is keeping the flexibility to me, and I'm not trying to give them an excuse. They're the worst team in basketball and it looks bad. But I also understand as long as it happens at some point, keeping yourself available to strike when the deal happens. Now, if that doesn't happen, then it's going to be, I'm going to feel even worse for Pistons fans, right? But it feels like to me, that's what they're setting up for. Instead of committing, again, okay, yes, we all think Cam Johnson has value, but if Cam Johnson only plays 40 games a year and he's at $27 million for the next 4 years, so not only did you tie up cap space, but then you like kind of lost it. You lost an ad, like he's not as valuable, right? So unless you're sure about a player, I don't mind kicking the can down the road. Now, like what I was saying, and I think you agree with me, they can't do that again. It can't be this bad again. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree with you or them. I'm saying I could understand why they are making sure every option available is open in case that deal comes, that Donovan Mitchell deal comes, that DeJounte Murray deal comes. I mean, we can go down the right. There's always the deal, and then it's always a player going to a team. You're like, oh, I didn't expect that. I mean, Blake Griffin, right? Perfect example. Wrong player, same type of situation.
So I just want to say this for all my listeners. So what I'm going to decide to do, I'm just going to go and post editing, and I'm going to read the ad there and just put it somewhere earlier in the segment because I don't want to cut this conversation off we're going with. So we're just going to keep going, and then you guys can thank me later. You feel me? I'm doing that for you guys. I don't have to do that. I could just get out the way now, but
Saying bow to him.
I'll go the extra step for him. I'll go the extra step to keep this going.
You got to catch a movie soon, don't you?
Yeah, it's at 7:20, but the movie theater is. I don't know if you know where Partridge is. Partridge Creek. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not too far from my house.
Macomb area, right? Or Sterling Heights?
Yeah, Macomb.
Yeah.
But yeah, look. So like in the off season, I want to change the topic a little bit. But in the off season, I agreed mostly with everything that the GM did. Mostly, but I won't actually. Let me not say agree. I understood it the same way you're explaining it. If you don't like something, kicking it down the road and then absorbing second round picks, 2 of them, whether you consider them great assets or not, whatever.
Or just trying to stay afloat, right? Like Monty Morris supposedly would help you stay afloat and you only have him for a year. Right. Obviously it hasn't worked out like that, but like you said, we understand the line of thinking.
Yeah, I understood the line of thinking 100%. But just like you've mentioned, I've mentioned, it can't then blow up in your face like it has, because then you're held accountable. Especially like you said, when you come out and say that you want to be competitive and playing competitive games until April. They're not playing competitive games in December. Like it's not.
Right.
It's not.
You're right.
So all that considered, that's why it's obviously it's been such a massive catastrophic failure. They're potentially going to have the worst season of all time if stuff doesn't change.
I love that you're skipping past like the worst losing streak of all time straight to the worst record.
Oh, I mean, that's done. I mean, that's already happened.
You don't think they're getting Utah?
No, it's coming. It's over with. That's
it's
done.
Funny. I saw Utah's Tony Jones, who covers the Jazz for The Athletic. He asked Utah fans, "Are you more worried about Cleveland on Wednesday or Detroit on Thursday or whatever?" And all the Utah fans think they're losing to the Pistons.
They're not losing to the Pistons.
And you know how Pistons fans are. You know how the Pistons fans are. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I'm curious. I think they're off a back-to-back, so I wonder if he plays the first one or the second one. I don't think he does both.
I can't see it happening. I think losing streak's already there, and it's like now they're just competing with the 1973 Sixers at this point. That's who they're competing.
How many wins was that? 9?
Yeah, 9. Right now, it's gotten so bad. I just want to let you know that like sports books are putting out like over unders for the Pistons to get above 9 wins now. That's happening. So that's
Have
like
you jumped on it.
No, I'm not touching it. Anything Pistons related, I'm staying the hell away from. You don't know.
I'm with you. People were putting money on Pistons Wizards. I'm like, you guys are sick.
No, yeah, no. You stay the hell away from this team. That's my suggestion. Anyone get involved in betting. But all right, let me ask you this. So I wanted to play a game of most likely, but I'm just going to do 2 of those. That's it. And now I want to move on to the final topic. And Nick, if you listen to this, I'm sorry I went a little over, but this is too good of a conversation for me to cut it off. It's not happening. It is what it is. You guys can deal with it. I'm sorry. So guys, we're actually going to cut this episode off right here. This is going to be the first time we do a 2-part episode because this episode went on for so long and had such incredible information, such a great conversation going back and forth between me and James that I didn't want to cut off the episode and not, try to cut James off or cut off our conversations to where we just didn't record the rest of it. I let it keep going. So instead, what we're going to do is this is part 1 of the episode, and there's going to be a part 2 dropped at the exact same time. So if you guys love the conversation, you guys want to keep listening, go check out part 2 to me and James' conversation. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was worthy of having to cut it up in 2 episodes because that's just how good the conversation I thought was going. So a lot of juicy stuff said in this second episode, a lot of high quality information. Go check it out, man. Appreciate you guys. I'll catch you guys in that next one. But appreciate all of you guys. I hope you guys enjoy the next episode.